At the beginning, at the Jewish Museum, with a lecture by Jacqueline Goldstein, entitled Perseverance and Preservation, Real on Washington Avenue. That's how I read it. Okay, so welcome, Jacqueline.
So, first of all, good morning. Can you hear me, or should I? Microphone is better? Okay. So, obviously over there, you've been at 301 Washington Avenue, right, which is our main building. So the backstory is, number one, the picture you're looking at is 1993. And obviously, it's a lot different looking than today. So the backstory of the museum is this building was built in 1929. I don't know how much information you guys have yet on it. You guys know the history yet? Oh, sorry. So 1929, this is built, and within a few years, the congregation, remember, this is the first synagogue in Miami Beach. So the congregation had grown within a few years, so they open up this building. 1936 it opens, and this becomes a social home. And in 1936, that was built by Henry Hohlhauser, the famed Art Deco architect. I'm sure you all know him. So he built this building in 1936. Over here. This is an early photograph, I would have to say late 1930s. And this is what the building looked like back then. Originally, the building had these benches that we were able to restore and save a few over there. And you'll see the entire interior of the building also, this is before AC, had not the stained windows yet, but these buildings all around the perimeter were left open for obviously airflow. Here you are in the 1950s, late 1950s, as you can see the cars. And one more thing. Now in the 1950s, they got rid of the benches. So the building in itself is progressing. And you were looking at initially, I would have to say, they were hoping to seat about 800 people when the building first opened. And the stadium seats really amplified that, got them up to that number. And the benches were put in storage, which fortunately for us, we were able to salvage some of them. So in 1936, the building opens and the congregation expands so much. And by the 1970s, as you're all aware, the Art Deco area, Barbara Kappelman is fighting with her life to create this historic district. And here is, before I go into that, this is what the building looked like in 1993 before Ira Giller. Where are you, Ira? There he is. Ira Giller is the architect who spearheaded and handled the entire restoration of the glory it is today. So what happened in 1979 is the congregation, Beth Jacob, appealed to the National Register of Historic Places to get this building labeled so they can start securing it. Because at the time, again, it's probably not new material for you guys, but if you can see at the time, demographics were changing here, buildings were falling apart, and it was imperative to get this area designated. So this building, they made sure as well. As you can see here, this is the so at that time, this was still a viable congregation, you still had people coming. But by the late 1980s, there was no money. The congregation had dwindled. It had dwindled so much that this became, again, the main sanctuary area. And the building 301 had fallen into disrepair. So in 1992, the city of Miami Beach provided an ordinance and their own historic designation to keep 301 still standing and not turning into condos. And here you can see where the proposed historic site is and the lots and where you are right now, as shown in the map. So that's 1992. And at that point, the building is looking like this. And by 1992, they had created, again, I'm sure you all know, but the traveling exhibition Mosaic needed a home. And this building, I don't want to say it was on the market, but it needed a lot of help. And in 1992, the city creates the designation. By 1993, the Mosaic and Ira Giller back there began this construction, total renovation. And I had asked Ira a while ago what needed to be done on the building. And he said everything, everything. As you can see here, all the damage everywhere, from the roof down to the floors, down to the basement. These stained glass windows in particular, a lot of them needed to be restructured, reset. After the hurricane, they also covered the windows with a much more impactful glass. I'm not sure what Ira can tell us later what the material was, but it was the glass to protect the stained glass windows. And you can see the mold and everything. I'm showing you what it took to get the building back to its present. As you can see here, the massive amount of damage. And so what happened in 1992, while they were running, trying desperately to secure grants and raise funding to save that building, they did. They succeeded by 93. I'm showing you. Here are the seats that I showed you earlier from the 50s. The architectural Art Deco friezes outside. Some of them were so badly damaged that they had to create new molds to recast them. And I heard something really interesting. For the exterior of the buildings, they had to dig through 27 layers of paint to find the original color for the restoration. If you can imagine, 27. Now, this is where as Ira told me, top to bottom, everything from the copper dome, the floors, ceilings, resetting the entire building. As you can see here with the scaffolding, I mean, it was truly, truly a magnificent challenge that they had to rise up to. Like I said, everything from the scaffolding to the ceiling. It's really, really remarkable. And here you even have the Art Deco chandeliers. What was so important for them during this reconstruction, and the reason of why this building, is when they applied for, to put something on the National Register of Historic Places, there has to be reasons of why. Why should they take care of this? Why safeguard it? And here is some more right there. You're seeing them working on the chandeliers over there. So the question was, why safeguard this building? Number one was the fact that if you look at the historic context, this was the first synagogue in Miami Beach. And, at the time it was built in 36, the demographics of the beach, the Jewish population was exploding. So historically, it was a very important building for that reason, is the exploding population and the focus it had on the community. Became, as I said, this became the social home where they would have all kinds of events. They put in a Hebrew day school here. So it was really, really a focal point for the Jewish community all the way through the early 80s. At that point, the congregation was dwindling. As I showed you, you can tell by the 301s, basically falling apart. So historically, it's a very important building for the community and the surrounding environment. But in addition to that is as you're all here for Art Deco, a lot of people say our greatest asset in our collection is actually the building itself. So built in 1936 with Hochhauser, that is an Art Deco masterpiece. And with the grant and the funding in 1993, we were able to start, as you can see here with all the ones, start the work. It took them 2 years. Imagine this is the back. 2 years to get it back to the restoration of its full glory. So they were able to do the initial National Register of Historic Places in 1980 because, like I said, you had the community, historically for the Jewish community. You had very early on, when they created the buildings, the members of the board spearheading this new 1936 property were, very important historical members of the community, the Dobrin family, the Weiss family, Baron de Hirschmeyer. All of these people were super involved, like I said, in the city, the community, not just the Jewish community, obviously, the community of Miami Beach, the building of the city itself, creating banks, creating all kinds of different parks and properties. So that really, was a huge asset for the city to keep, as you can imagine, historic properties from becoming condominiums. So 1980 rolls around, they get the designation, congregation starts to dwindle. Like I said, this falls into disrepair. They're utilizing this building, but again, realizing that this cannot cease to exist. It has to be, as Barbara Kaplan and running around, the lack of funds in 92, it was so important for the city to create that designation, which I showed you the ordinance earlier in 92. And why it was so important is because just finding funds to restore a building takes time. Show you the horror story. So that in 1992, creating this designation gave Mosaic, who was looking for the home for the Jews of Florida whole exhibition, gave them that little bit of extra time they needed really to secure all the funding for architect Ira Giller to get started on the project. And, they did. They were able to do that. And so 2 years of work. Did you have a question?
You said that the grant came through in 92. From where did the grant come from?
Probably a whole bunch of different public donation, private donation. It was a whole conglomerate of, pieces and pieces, pulling it up to get everything that they needed, fortunately. So 2 years on, and then, like I said earlier, when I asked Ira, what did they need to do? And he literally said, top to bottom. And, very important to say was not only the copper dome, which is highly unusual piece of architecture from Miami Beach, but if you notice the lighting, all of the Art Deco chandeliers. So everything, all the chandeliers were deinstalled. All the conservation was done on them, as you can see right here, from top to bottom. And when we installed, you had this absolutely remarkable piece of architecture that is truly, for me, when I first came to this museum about 10 years ago, I've been working here for 10 years, I was shocked by the craftsmanship in the building. And as an architectural historian myself, being able to walk around such a, you're literally in a piece of history, just like if you're in Notre Dame in France or any of these major buildings, the Acropolis, etc. For me to walk into a living part of Art Deco, it's an amazing feeling. And again, that's, why they had things like the National Register of Historic Places. But the fact here, we were also able for the city to step in 92 to create an additional safeguards on the building is also remarkable for the city to be able to do something like that for people, for buildings, for everything. And, again, it blows my mind that Barbara Kaplan was able to do so much. And I'm sure you guys have all heard of her in the restoration. I even heard once that I don't know if it's urban legend, but she actually lied down in front of a bulldozer and just saved the city, or the city's building. So she started in 76. And like I said, by 1980, this had been designated. So, the reason why I called my talk today Perseverance, right, is because you see a lot of Deco buildings falling into disrepair. And, part of the problem is for us to be able to create a cultural institution, we were able to get grants and funding and keep it alive. But the issue, you're seeing around is a lot of these old apartment buildings are falling apart. And because they can't turn into cultural institutions because they're private units, they're facing an uphill battle. And I don't know, how they can get grants for private buildings, but, whenever you can turn such a piece of architecture into a cultural institution, then you can go and get the funding and the ordinances that you need to make it happen. So, it was very, very powerful to me to be able to see the demise, if you look at that, in pictures. I mean, when I go through this, it blows my mind, right? To create us back to this, it's just truly, truly remarkable. What you're seeing in the center is this right there with the glass top ceiling that Giller also headed that project. That was an alleyway. And what they did was they covered it, put in all the piping and ductwork for the AC, for the lighting, for the plumbing. And that was also, fascinating to me because you have 29, you have 36, and then you have a very modern piece of architecture, that glass top roof. So this building really gives us a lot. You have the Spanish style look of the exterior of this building, the Art Deco, and the glass and steel modern. So what you guys are sitting in is just this, powerful piece of three historical, I would have to say, time periods, even though 29 and 36 were close, completely different building styles. And, it's truly, truly a pleasure for me to be able to work every day and come into an environment and see what the perseverance did and the preservation of such a glorious, glorious piece of Art Deco. And I'm so glad that you guys were able to start here and do your Art Deco tours and be able to start and finish in our building and our huge asset over there. And that's it. I'm just honored to be a part of this. I'm open for questions if anybody has anything.
Jackie, at the time of the restoration, was there future use designated for the building?
There was not. And like I said, that congregation had become so small that they moved everybody back in here. So there really that was what the danger was the fear, the immediacy needed to save the building because nothing was happening anymore at all, like danger of death,
Anyone else? Who owns the building now?
We do.
The building is currently owned by the FIU Foundation. Florida International University Foundation owns the property.
Do they know what that foundation is?
No. I think Susan mentioned that we're part of Florida International University, and a dozen years ago, when the former executive director was getting ready to retire, she felt it would be vital for the success of the museum to continue to be associated with a large public university. And Florida International University is one of the largest public universities in the state of Florida. It's based out of Miami, and they acquired us almost 12 years ago. And the building actually is owned by the FIU Foundation, not by the university itself, just a part of the way that it was structured. So it's been an asset for us to be part of the university. Do you agree?
I agree. I don't know if we're standing.
Did the Jewish community of Miami rally in the 90s to help fund and support this restoration?
I would obviously have to say enough. I wasn't living here, New Yorker, born and raised, but I would have to say enough through public and private to keep the building afloat. I don't know how much rallying. We'd have to ask someone living here. Do you know?
I don't really understand the question, but the museum itself, I don't know if you know, it started as a tour. and it was called Mosaic. And it was a group of Floridians got together and traveled around the state of Florida, collecting all of the memorabilia, stories, ephemera, then told in the Jewish history of Florida going back to 1763. And they toured this exhibit around the state of Florida and south of the United States for a couple of years. And when the tour was finished, they looked for a place to put this collection. And this building was empty. And the woman who owns the Stonecraft, so the story goes, said to the former executive director, Marcia Jones, that there's going to be synagogue up the street. Perfect place for a Jewish museum. So that was the beginning of the acquisition of that building, and then eventually this building. And I'm sure Ira will tell you how we joined the two buildings together. And if you want to learn more about Marcia's therapist, there's an exhibit about her life in the little Western Gallery and Center there. Talks for sure about the whole process of gathering mosaic and putting mosaic together. So that's the backstory of where we ended up here in 1995.
Are the canopies going to stay?
I'm sorry?
Are the canopies on the buildings, are they going to stay?
Definitely. We've had to replace them a few times because, you know, you have the sun, the sand, the salt, but absolutely, absolutely. Anyone? We're good? It's a pleasure.